All right, this is going to be great. I've been looking forward to this very moment for quite some time. This is the moment that Marco Marinucci interviews Marco Marinucci. So this is not a misspelling or just an error on the video, but this is actually a very funny story that I would love to share with my friend on the other side, Marco Marinucci. So, hi, Marco, how you doing?
Ciao, I'm doing great. It's exciting to have this first interview with the big Marco Marinucci.
So this is going to help me so much because in the last few years, every time that we stumble upon each other or people that thought they were talking to me and then eventually wanted to talk to you and vice versa, finally we're going to point them to this video so that we get some clarifications. It's going to help both of our lives.
Absolutely. I think we took a picture about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And keep sending people the picture with the description of your CV or resume and my resume, and it's incredibly similar, at least on the high level. And people don't want to believe it, but it's true.
So Marco, I'm going to share the story. I give my version of it with my recollection. So this is the probably first few years of Facebook, and as everybody was doing, you're going to check yourself, and if you see some other people with your names, and all of a sudden I get this message from this Marco Marinucci on the other side that says, hey, how you doing? Nice name that you have. And then with a little bit of your background, and you were still, I think at the time, in Germany, and then goes blank for several years, and then yet another message, probably this time over email, is, hey, Marco, by the way, remember me? I graduated over business school, and by the way, I'm here doing venture in Silicon Valley. So that's how everything started. But yeah, what's your recollection, Marco? So give your side of the story.
Well, it goes back even more. It goes back a lot longer. So my side of the story is I'm a little bit younger, not much younger, but a little bit younger. And I was a track athlete when I was in high school and in college, and quite successful. So I was, at the German championships, and was Googling myself again and again and again. And despite being in the news, in the local news, in the newspaper, every time I would Google my name, this other Marco would appear. I was like a little star, but then there was this gigantic star next to it, and so I would never appear. So watched videos of you, and then when I moved to the Bay Area, I was like, wait, I don't know anyone here. This is 4.5 years ago. I'm going to contact Marco and see if he wants to get a coffee and be the first person I meet here.
That's fantastic. You never told me that part of the story. So even to make it a little bit more interesting and complicated, there is actually the third of us. So Marco Marinucci is not a very common name as a combination. So there might be a few, but it's not that common like the Mario Rossi of the world. And funny story is the first person that I met here in San Francisco 19 years ago, when actually even before I came here, even before I decided to stay for longer, I was here just to test the water. And I was doing something similar. That was actually the first time. I don't think Gmail had started yet. Actually, I'm pretty sure that it hadn't. And so I was checking the availability on Yahoo, and I found my name taken. And so I do a quick search, and I find this other Marco Marinucci that happens to be my age group, and by the way, living in San Francisco. And that's the first guy that I actually met here. So that's a different story. These guys that work for McKinsey and other, and with other combinations of connections, but we should get together next time. The next chat is going to be the three of us. Check which is the real.
Okay. I think we should do that. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. I think that was the core of the interview, but now on the edges, let's talk about business a little bit, since our topic of conversations are really the integration of the world of corporates, especially when there is a venture side, and startups. And that's what you do for a living for quite some time now. So I'll let you introduce a little bit more of your world of reference, but is an interesting side of the business that we want to address in this next couple of interviews that we're going to have, is really with a focus on automotive. And you as a partner at Hella Venture, Hella, very interesting family-owned business from Germany, 100 years old, 40,000 people, 7 billion, still family business. And the the venture side that today you lead out of San Francisco. So let's give us a little bit of a color about what Hella is, a little bit of history, and then how Hella Ventures came together.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Hella has been around for 121 years now, and really it's been always a stable, reliable automotive supplier throughout the history of the car, effectively. And most people, some people know the company because of this one product that has been very successful in the B2C business, and that's really this rally lights that people add to their cars to have like additional lighting with the Hella logo on it. And that's a typical story of these medium-sized enterprises. They become global players, but are really B2B players, and so never really become very visible to the public. And that one product is the product that most people know. Over the past years, especially over the last 30 years, lighting has been always really the flagship of the company. But electronics development and electronics products production in the automotive space has become equally large for Hella and equally important, especially now going into the future of autonomous driving, electrification, and the connected car megatrends. So Hella has become one of the market leaders in radar, car access, body control modules, all types of comfort units that are black boxes that basically effectively nobody ever sees. And we are going towards lidar development at this point. And also in the camera space, we have multiple deployments with multiple OEMs. So it's become more of a tech company, strong focus on electronics in the future, and effectively being well positioned for playing a significant role in the future with these 4 megatrends.
Sorry, maybe mention some of who is your market? Is typically OEMs. You sell directly to OEMs.
Yes, exactly. So the main market are directly OEMs with a big aftermarket division. For spare parts, of course, but the main customers are effectively all OEMs that exist on the planet, with strong focus in Europe and in China. But also, we sell to every American OEM. Typical global automotive player at this point.
So tell a little bit of the history behind Hella Ventures, and I think is a typical process of how, especially family businesses, still even at that size, family-owned business, I wouldn't call it family business, family-owned businesses, even at that size, test the water initially, and then they figure there's actually something that makes sense to scale and make it bigger. So a little bit of color about Hella Ventures.
Yeah. So we started about 4.5-5 years ago. The idea was born actually initially from the chairman of the company that represents also the family. It still owns 60% of Hella.
So Hella is still a private company, by the way. So
it's a publicly listed company, but 40% are only in float and 60% are with the company, and they will stay also for a few more years this way. So it's very much family controlled, with the appeal and the drive of a public company ultimately. Hella Ventures started about 5 years ago when the chairman saw that something was happening in Silicon Valley that, of course, he didn't want to miss out, and had this visionary a feeling that something was happening that we needed to be part of. And so Hello Ventures was started. We sent someone over and had him effectively test the waters and see what is the right approach. And we went through, I would say there's two ways people approach this problem. One way is the way we did it. I think that was the way you did it in the past, the early adopters. I mean, don't want to call us early adopters, because the really early ones were the Bosches, the BASFs that have been here for more than 10 years. But I think the big trend were really the big market in CVC exploded was really 2017, 2018. And we've been 2 years earlier. And so it was not so much of a structured approach where you would send a full team and hire an external company that helps you set up the CVC. But it was really explore what is good, what's happening there, and what is good for us. And I think also all these services came a little bit later. So the good thing for us, ultimately, we kind of like learned all the ways not to do it till we learned the way that works for us. And so I think I can paint a little bit the story of, I hear often, this is the way how to do corporate VC. And I think that there is not this one way. And you have to find the way that works for this one corporate with the leadership that is, in the positions that they are at this point, and the characters that they have and the culture that they have. And so it was maybe good for us not to have this, dictated way that this is how you should do it, and find it out ourselves.
And so, how is Hello Ventures different today from version 1.0 when you first came here and tested the water?
So in the very beginning, we actually had a European consulting company helping us to write a white paper, and effectively they suggested that we should do very early stage investments that are 10 to 15 years out of go to market. And
I might just say that we were in that company there, the European consultant companies that you just mentioned.
You were not the company. I mean, I'm not going to name the name, but it was terrible advice, because venture funds run over 10 years. And if something would start go to market in 10 to 15 years, I don't know what you're doing, but you're not doing ventures. So that was the very beginning, was very early stage, finding, they called it finding the diamond in the rough, and finding something earlier than others. So what I then started doing is effectively reach out to all the more advanced CVCs like Bosch, like BMW, and just learned what they were doing. And the result was that, they would do a seed investment here and there, but it was really more the exception and not the rule. They would look for something more mature. And that effectively is really on high level, basically where we are now on a Series A, Series B, Series C type of investments. And the main reason, I think, or there's a multitude of reasons, but one reason is, of course, the market that we're in. We were sent out to find real disruption in our market, and ended up looking and ended up not finding it, because real disruption is not only a market, it is also for a player. And for us, for example, as Hella, we don't really have many components in the combustion engine that is being disrupted. I mean, everyone knows that by now. So we couldn't do anything there. And the autonomous space, or automated driving space, was effectively playing really into our cards, because we were already well positioned with camera and radar. So we've pivoted to a way to look for innovation that comes out of Silicon Valley, or that comes through Silicon Valley from wherever in the world, that we could connect to our business unit and jointly then bring to market. And that has been a strategy has been working very well, because bringing a product automotive grade to an OEM to market in mass production is not a skill that a startup typically has, or that they should ever acquire, in my opinion, because the startups that replicate the entire supply chain instead of focusing on what they're strong at typically end spending a lot more money and getting to the same or worse result.
Let's share some numbers there in terms of when you guys started investing. What's the structure of the fund? I know it's kind of an evergreen where you call for capital, how many investments you do, what's the average of the ticket size investment or follow on. So a little bit of a context.
So in the beginning, the typical strategy was effectively to invest in, so the target was a number of investments that had to be fulfilled. And that's of course not a great target. But some corporates still have that type of target. You got to do 10 deals a year, which, if you don't find a good deal, you shouldn't do a deal. And so we invested in the beginning really a few $100,000 to $1 million maybe. And we did in the first year, I think in the first year, 1 deal, and then the second year immediately like 8 or something. And stayed with these smaller check sizes because we were looking at earlier stages. And at this point, we pivoted and really do Series A and B with check sizes between 1 to 10 million, with a sweet spot between 2 and 5, where we typically don't lead, have the ability to, but don't lead. Because we think the space is still hot enough that financial VCs find it attractive enough for them to lead. And I ultimately think if somebody is coming to Hella Ventures to lead, then they typically didn't get the money from financials. And we want to be in a situation where we can bring new technology to market, be innovative, but at the same time participate from a market that is hot, where many investors are pouring money in. And so the corporate arm the corporate ultimately doesn't have to finance it all by themselves.
How large is the portfolio today? And in the definition of a CVCs, where you have a H1, H2, H3, meaning in terms of horizons of businesses that are your current business, your future business, and your very far away businesses. What is the focus, and how many total investments are there?
We have invested in total in 14 different portfolio companies, have done over 25 deals with typical fund investment strategy, like any financial VC. I would say that really the bulk of the new and well-functioning investments with strong financial leads in place were all in business that is basically the business of today-ish and tomorrow. So it's a very short timeline. It's 3 years to market or less, and going potentially not only into the fields of product portfolio, but also into the fields of industry 4.0 logistics. You can bring it really to the business of today, with the option to improve it even more tomorrow. But I think ultimately for the venture market, as Hella, the biggest thing you can offer is being an industrialization partner, or being a first and a great customer. And if you can do that, I feel that you will have a very strong position in the market, where top tier VCs will come to you because they know you will ultimately help the company.
One of the crucial link between the venture side or the innovation side of the outpost of innovation of corporates and the headquarters is typically the way they interact and engage the business units, and also how do they stimulate the business units into being part of that filtering, in your case, potential integration, potential acquisition, if at any level of relevance. How is the process that you guys put in place, and also how do you make sure that the business units are engaged in this selection process, or reaping the profit out of the post investment?
Yeah. So I think the first 2 years, what we did is really, I think I've flown 10 times to Germany. I must also say I've worked for Hella before. I did.
How many years? How many years have you been working for Hella now?
In total, 13 years.
Okay.
in 10, so it's funny. It's 13 years in 10 years of professional experience, because
So you started before becoming a professional working for them.
Yeah, it's because in Germany, it's typically getting a scholarship. The main way you get scholarships in the industry or in industrial or like in engineering engineering programs is through companies and corporates. So I had a scholarship through Hella, and so started learning about the company since I'm 19, and that definitely helps to be out here. But knowing the culture, knowing the people, and knowing what they're looking for, and to try to extract that in a very efficient way, and you know, kind of
We didn't mention
knowing.
at the beginning when we were telling the story, and I was born and raised in Italy and moved here at the beginning of 2000. You were born and raised in Germany, regardless of your name, but with the clearly Italian heritage. But you were born right in Germany, and
I was born actually in Chieti in Italy, but I've lived there for a year, and so raised completely in Germany. That's why I don't have an Italian accent, but I can imitate it a little bit, but not gonna last a long time. Yeah, so I grew up in Germany. I grew up actually in the town where our headquarters is, which makes it even a little bit easier to understand the culture. And so how do we do that with talking to the corporate, and how did we find out what they want? So one thing is we've spent a lot of time flying to headquarters and effectively just going from door to door, explaining who we are, explaining what we do, and just simply asking what bothers you, like what are you working on, and just collecting that knowledge. And I find it really difficult, to be honest, to put that ultimately into a structured table and say, hey, this is all the things they told me, and then now let's go out there and look for something. What works for me, at least, and every brain works a little bit differently, is just hearing these things, write them down so you don't forget them. But your brain will put the right pieces together at the right time when you hear the right pitch from a company. So you kind of like need to know what the scope is, what you're looking for. And, I can't look for social media companies or games or something. But to be very narrow in what the company really wants, and look for that, I think that's much harder to do than people think, because you don't know what you don't know. So it's better to collect what they're working on, and then contact the top executive in each in the division that you find, where you find innovation or find a company. Contact that top executive and build a good relationship. So luckily, Hella has a good size where the company is not so large that power and R&D is completely distributed throughout the world, but it's very much centered in one headquarters or in a few places in the world. So the big advantage there is that you can have monthly one-on-ones with every top executive. You get them to know over time. You start building a trust relationship, and when something comes up, sometimes you will have nothing for 2 years for them, but sometimes you have something, and then you can be quick, and then you can have immediate impact by contacting the top person that then engages his or her teams, and starts evaluating the company, and that's very important to be quick there.
Yeah, and also something that is relatively new, right? We talked about Bosch and BMW. They've been doing a venture for ages now. So so what drives them is been evolving over time. In your case, it's something that you're building while flying. Maybe some examples out of your investments. Is there any collaboration in addition to the financial engagement as a result of the investment, and do you expect that any of that will also turn into an acquisition? That's how you guys found it.
So let's first address the last question. So when it comes to acquisitions, that's Hella's business. That's not Hella Ventures. So I can't and don't want to speak for them simply because of strong conflict of interest there. But the way we invest is a little bit tricky, and it's a little bit complicated. So the strategy is effectively we have to sign an MOU, 2-pager, basically a memorandum of understanding between the company and the business unit, where the business unit agrees in front of the CEO and the management board of Hella to work with the company. At least the intention. If it doesn't work in 2 or 3 years, okay, we try. But we have something in place. It needs to be agreed. It needs to be signed. And even if it's not legally binding, nobody wants to lose their face in front of the management board, especially in a German environment where people stick around for 30 years in these companies. You don't want to burn your name.
You're just halfway through your career at Hella. There are 50 more to come.
Well, then I can retire mid-40s. Yeah, that would be great.
What is is that part of the investment cycle, or that's something that MOU you do it after the investment happened?
So it depends. I mean, like I try not to build processes that are set in stone, because I learned that you build a process and then you find a new situation, and this self-built process that you thought is going to help you is actually standing in your way. So I try to keep it.
That's your Italian DNA coming out, actually, out of the German structure.
That could be. I think that's very not German. German would be, we define the process first and then we follow the process. But you gotta adapt constantly. So we try to do the MOU first, but sometimes we have cases like in a company that we invested in called Lightfield Lab. They have holographic displays, and we found that some of these optical elements could be used for headlights and for taillights. But the Series A was happening at that point. We were brought in by some of our co-investor friends that we invested before, also Bosch in that case. And we had 2 months. So we looked at it. We did a deep dive on a technology. We brought people out to evaluate it. But it's way too early to put together an MOU. So we didn't do an MOU, but the executive VP of the division still felt comfortable to say, we looked at it and it looks legit. Let's give it a try. But without this engagement, I feel we don't have much to bring to the market besides money. There is enough money. So to effectively get to the best technology companies, you have to bring something to the table that is valuable. And for example, for a holographic display company that's mainly playing in the consumer space, getting potentially tens of millions of dollars of additional revenue from the automotive industry that they never thought about, that's a great for Hella Venture to get on the cap table. And of course, you got to deliver on it. If you don't deliver it, that was a pitch, and people will talk about it. And that was the last time you got on that into a company of that level.
So I just wanted to switch gear and start talking about the present and a little bit of the future, at least the way that we see it. Just when we're recording the session, we're in full lockdown in the Bay Area. Again, both of us in the Bay Area. You're in San Francisco. I'm in the little town of Woodside. It's been like that in our case, I think, in my case, for a full month tomorrow. And I guess your case pretty similar. And there are a bunch of things that are happening at the world level. So I think this is probably, as the experts saying, probably the worst time for US, to some extent still under control in the Bay Area. But Marco, what are you missing the most out of this lockdown?
I'm missing the most to be able to engage with our companies directly, especially I think everywhere where you already have a relationship, that's great, but new relationships are built in person, and I think video can help a lot. But ultimately, when you go to dinner and when you speak about things that aren't necessarily about work, that's where the relationship gets deeper. And every investor is different, right? And everybody is builds trust in a different way. And for me, that's a big portion how I build trust. And so that long term is not going to work out for me. So I hope that the lockdown is over before the end of the year. I'm just kidding. Hopefully soon.
Well, the one thing that actually typical when we start our team calls, there are a couple per day. The one thing that we always check is the look, the hairy faces that people have, and that is growing by the minutes. That's the one thing that actually I'm missing the most. So hopefully we can get out pretty soon. But let's talk about. I want to talk about the kind of the It's very hard to say, and here we're all looking in the crystal ball, but the way that we in venture world see the impact of this clear crisis that we're running in the midst of, and maybe zooming into the automotive industry, that for the most part, if you read experts, everybody's an expert or is not these days. But clearly, automotive is one of the industry that, with consumer spending being highly affected, would potentially be hit the most. Having said that, I think yesterday or the day before, was looking at some of the data coming out of China. China clearly also for the whole automotive industry being today, together, I guess, with India, the holy grail, where the lost sales even before COVID-19 could be recouped by the automotive industries. So clearly of a crucial focus. I was looking at the new statistics being posted, that manufacturing PMI, that is an index that is giving a sense of what the industries of the manufacturers are projecting as potential needs of materials. So really they're feeling about the future. In China, I think it's past 50 points. That is typically the limit of optimism. And so overall, long story short, to say that China's that crucial market for it, while sales clearly have plummeted, the industry, the manufacturing industry, is showing, at least from the production cycle, a lot of positive feeling. I don't know, it's more of a wishful thinking, and this just gives a direction, but the overall feeling. So what's your view of how is the medium and long-term impact of the automotive industry as a result of the epidemic?
Yeah. As you said in the beginning, it's hard to tell, since my opinion adapts and changes, sometimes drastically, sometimes marginally, almost every day or by the hour. But today, I think is April 7th, and Tuesday. So my view today is as follows. My friends in Shanghai sending me pictures of barbecues and walking through the streets, and of course they're wearing masks, but the normal life is starting back up again. I think for Asian countries and cultures, it will be easier to go back to normal because they have gone through SARS and MERS, and so there's a certain experience how this goes, and this certain fear that somebody could be infected with something dangerous has always been there. So I think they will go quicker back to normal. Here in the US, it's different. I think the fear of, for example, sharing a car with rideshare will stay for a while, and I think robotic solutions to clean cars won't be there so quickly and mass deployed that every Uber will have, or any other ride-hailing will have a complete clean car. Especially
sorry to interrupt. I saw videos not too long ago. I mean, it feels like a lifetime ago. It was in China last week. There were people going on car sharing, and there was they put plastic pretty as taped all around from the front seat to the back seats as the makeshift filter between the two areas. But it's definitely there's a.
It is true, but what makes it hard to tell about ride sharing is that we don't really know how exactly. We don't know the corner cases of how the virus can be transmitted. So that means being in the same car that an infected person has been, even if the driver is separated, but like the last passenger, could potentially, you could contract the virus. So as long as we don't understand that, I think there will be a fear for car sharing. And what does that mean? Does it mean people will buy more cars? I think in the short term, no, because the people that don't have a car, either they build their lifestyle in a way that they can't afford it, or don't really need it because they live in a very congested city. or don't know how to drive because they never needed to get a driver's license. So in the short term, I think there's not going to be an effect. That there could be a long-term effect where owning a car becomes very counterintuitive to all the movements that we've seen over the last decades of something that people might consider. But ultimately, I think when you look at the outlook for the automotive industry, there's one thing that we're seeing right now is that the supply chain seems to be well-ish understood. So one thing I was most concerned is about the next black swan somewhere in the supply chain, that this one material can't be delivered. And because of coronavirus or some other domino stones that were triggered through coronavirus, and that effectively would affect manufacturability, even if the demand is there. So I think that seems to be somewhat under control. Normally, the automotive industry has been built to easily react to local catastrophes, like in Japan with the earthquake, like hurricanes or floodings. So we can react to that, but we can't really react if the entire continent is down. So that's why manufacturing right now is standing still. The more we learn about the virus, the more we see that the next stage could be to go back to work, to start manufacturing again, but with very strong and very clear guidelines and measures, basically having the face masks, gloves, taking the temperature of the people on the floor multiple times a day, and limiting and following social distancing as much as possible. The question on the demand side effectively then is really depending on how long this is going to last. We see extremely high unemployment rates. The question there is also that the breakdown is going to be important. When people get furloughed for a week, they go and ask for unemployment money, but they're not really unemployed, but you will see them in the numbers. So those numbers are a little bit contradictory. So ultimately, how the economy is going to do is going to affect then how much demand is going to be there. But of course, if there's uncertainty, you always push out the purchase of a car or purchase of a house or any large purchase. So uncertainty is always bad for the automotive industry. But as of this point, things are slowing down a little bit quicker than we thought. So I'm becoming more positive as I was initially. But we don't really see the light at the end of the tunnel. So it's hard to tell. But we will see a slowdown, and you will see that companies with good balance sheets and good ability to reduce their fixed costs will do better than others. So it's hard to see beyond that.
Yeah, and that's why it's actually interesting for the first time looking at the world as the full value chain and looking at China as a model of what, to some extent, the rest of the world can be 2, 3, 4 months from now in terms of going back to semi-normal life. And again, these statistics that you see from manufacturing in China are extremely positive, at least as it stands, that they don't take into account demand and purchasing power being hit to a certain extent. This is also, I think, back to kind of a Europe or maybe even German-centric, where automotive is clearly one of the pillars of the economy. This is already an industry that is under pressure, right? So there's a lot of consolidation. We know the macro trends are not particularly positive, and so this is actually putting even more pressure, even with a GDP that is going to go down around the world, is already going down, and it's not going to be recuperated, at least for the foreseeable future. Do you think there, as a result of that, we don't want to call bad luck nor hoping for a macro transaction, but do you think that some of the major OEMs of Germany will have potentially some big restructuring or bailout from government? Now we're looking at Germany as a whole.
Yeah. I think at this point that's a little bit early to think in those dimensions. I think the big thing that we have to look at is that the difference to 2008, 2009 is that there was a systematic problem in the economy that trickled down then towards all industries effectively. And here, companies have made good profits over the last 10 years. We've seen in almost every automotive company, significant automotive tier ones, one record year after the other for 10 years in a row. So the cash positions of the companies are much better than they were back then. But no company is built to sustain and pay the employees for more than 3 months or 5 months without any revenue. So no matter how stable you are, at some point it's going to disrupt you. So it really comes down to how quick we can go back to work. And Germany is trying, as far as I read yesterday, to present plans to go back to work on April 19th, or at least to present plans how to go back to work.
Because to clarify today, the situation of today, all the lines are standing. Yours, all the providers, everything is stopped.
Completely stopped. There's no point for us to produce if our customers are not producing. And on top of that, the social responsibility is always number one, and safety and security of our employees is always more important than the company as a whole. Of course, nothing over human life, but the more we learn about the virus, and the more we see. So the one indicator that I think is going to tell us what's going to happen is, as soon as you start seeing more randomized testing in communities to understand how many antibodies have been built and so how many, to say it in different words, how many people have been infected and never showed symptoms or mild symptoms and are immune now to the disease. As soon as we will see that, and we are quite a while away from that in the States because we're behind on testing, then you can start building plans how to go back to work in a safe environment or in a safe way, if the tests are positive in the way we expect them to be.
So that's great. I think that takes me to the next topic, that is how to profit. How is the venture community potentially being able to profit from a totally unexpected situation? And in your subset, if some of the technologies that you're looking today are slightly different from what you were looking in the life pre-COVID-19. And so we talked about robotics. Definitely, there are some subset of the digital economy where Silicon Valley is getting stronger and stronger. So they took that as a big opportunity. You just mentioned the ability of testing people to go to work. It is something that has to be highly digitized, and yet there are no clear solution today as standard about that. So how is that impacting your role as a venture partner to look for solutions, and who do you think is going to profit from this new world of reference?
There's everything that is remote and robotics is going to profit very clearly. I think thinking in product portfolio, it's probably a step too far and too early. And I think to make a bets in that direction could be for tier one, premature. But we know one thing: economy is going to suffer this year, and it's probably going to suffer next year as well. So we know that for sure. So things that will be prioritized in every company that runs a low margin business ultimately, and that's almost every industrial company in the world, is saving money, being more efficient, and in companies today in the automotive industry where things are highly automated, it's more robotics. And it's saving on travel, being able to remote diagnose manufacturing lines and manufacturing lines remotely, for example, but also logistics. The more we can save in our logistics chain because we get, say, more digital visibility, the more ultimately profit we can make in a low profit industry. So things like that can be implemented quickly. And have a quick impact on the bottom line will definitely have priority versus making the next product portfolio investment.
Yeah, and connected to that, there is one certain fear that is driven by past experiences of the role of CVC, corporate venture capital, when it comes to financial partners to startups in downturns. Those are the first the first pockets to dry out pretty quickly. It's been like this in 2008, 2007. It's been like that before. So there's a certain pattern that is understandable where the corporate venture capital kind of become more restrictive in essential downturns, things that typically doesn't happen in a commercial VCs because our cycles and money committed are much longer. Can you commit? Is anything different at Hella Ventures today, and you expect that at least for the short foreseeable future that we can project today, any different from pre-COVID-19?
Yeah, so I think there is one thing where I could say it plays a little bit in our favor that has been happening in the automotive industry for the past year, is that the uncertainty between the triggered by the trade war, mainly between the US and China, the uncertainty has triggered lower growth rates in China, which triggered massive cost-saving programs in the automotive industry. And knowing that was happening, us as a corporate venture fund, or me, looking at the strategy, the clear strategy was for me, we got to be as light as possible. Like the cost structure, the footprint needs to be as low as possible. And if you look at it, there's so many things you can do for very little money. Like you can throw large parties with big gifts, or you can have intimate cocktail hours where, or happy hours where you put out a few drinks and invite people that you care about, and you have 50 people, and it costs you less than $1,000. But you have the same effect ultimately. And I think also when you look at the team size, you really have to think about what is essentially necessary in Silicon Valley, ultra high cost location, and what can be done in the company somewhere else. Talking about marketing, simpler things, or more standardized things like accounting and controlling. You don't need it locally. So for us, we have a team of 3 people and an office in San Francisco, which is, by the way, cheaper than Palo Alto. And we drove down the footprint as much as possible. And I'm not going to be able to say that everyone is or we are safe forever, depending on how bad the situation gets. But we're very well positioned in a position where we provide, for example, for radar and lidar, the core partnerships and the core investments in the technologies for the radar and lidar of the future. So we are somewhat also of a business development office, if you want so. And every VC is somewhere also a business developer. So as long as you can provide that value, and your footprint is not 10, 20 people in Silicon Valley making Silicon Valley salaries, you can be cheap. And ultimately, then investments come from the balance sheet, and investments need to reflect also the macroeconomical situation, and they can also be smaller when the valuations go down. But ultimately, I think at this point we are well positioned, we kind of built Hella Ventures with that in mind, that this is going to come, and you better have delivered by that point results and not invested in something that might deliver something in 5 years. At least that's the way Hella works.
So to recap, there's a bad news that we're not gonna see many Hella Ventures parties anymore. Kidding, not that there were that many. And the good news is that that's an opportunity for being more efficient and eventually, focus on what the potential outcome of all the processes. Listen, Marco, it's been a great pleasure. And now we do have a place to show to both of our acquaintances and potential clients that want to see the other Marco. Here's the video. And look forward to many more of those meetings in the future. So I cannot shake your hand, but give me 5. You can put it somewhere here. Hey,
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you and to speak about our business. And anytime, if you need someone, let me know. And stay safe. I know in Woodside it's a little nicer than in our tiny apartments in San Francisco.
Yeah.
But I look forward to see you in person soon.
Yeah, and let's keep the Marco Marinucci names up. All right. Thank you.